I was standing in the lobby of First Methodist Church on that frigid January morning when my sister walked through the double doors wearing a cashmere coat that cost more than I made in 6 months. She looked right through me like I was part of the furniture, then turned to Sister Patricia and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Is she having one of her good days, or should I come back later?" That was 3 months ago. By then, she'd already convinced half the congregation I was losing my mind. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been collecting evidence for weeks. I had recordings. I had documents. I had proof of every lie she'd told, every dollar she'd stolen, every signature she'd forged. And in about 90 seconds, I was going to stand up during testimony time and burn her entire world to the ground in front of 200 witnesses. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. To the night I realized my own family had declared war on me, and I was too loyal to see it coming. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in December, and I was lying awake in my senior living studio with a kitchenette and shared hallway, staring at the ceiling fans spinning slowly above my narrow bed. The blades made a clicking sound every rotation that I'd stopped noticing weeks ago. But tonight, it felt like a countdown. Each click marking another second of a life I didn't recognize anymore. Outside my single window, Houston sprawled dark and indifferent, the city lights dimmed by winter fog. The cold kept me inside most days now, and the windows fogged up from the warmth of the ancient heating system that rattled through the walls. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not at 55 years old, not in this place that smelled like industrial cleaner and overcooked green beans. Not in a building where the average resident was pushing 80 and most of them didn't remember what day it was. But my sister said it was best. My mother agreed. They told everyone I couldn't manage on my own anymore. Even though I'd managed perfectly fine for 32 years in my apartment on that small-town Main Street, with local shops and a diner where the waitresses knew I took my coffee black and my toast slightly burned. Gospel music played low from the radio on my nightstand, Mahalia Jackson singing about troubles of the world. My worn leather Bible with handwritten notes in the margins sat next to it, the spine cracked from decades of use, my grandmother's careful script filling every margin with her wisdom. Next to that, a plastic pitcher of sweet tea I kept in the mini refrigerator, the one comfort they let me keep when they moved me here. Everything else was gone. My furniture, my photo albums, my grandmother's china cabinet, the quilt my mother made me when I graduated high school. All of it disappeared into my sister's storage unit or got sold at an estate sale I wasn't invited to attend. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Just questions. How did I get here? When did my family decide I was disposable? And why did I let them convince me that this was love? The answer came the same way it always did, in my mother's voice echoing through my memory from childhood. Family takes care of family, and you're the oldest, so you take care of everyone else first. I'd built my entire life on that foundation. Reciprocity. The belief that if I sacrificed enough, gave enough, proved myself worthy enough, eventually they'd give back. Eventually they'd see my value. Eventually I'd be more than the daughter who never left Texas, who never made anything of herself, who worked retail at the same department store for 3 decades and had nothing to show for it except a bad back and a 401k that barely covered 1 year of rent. My sister had different ideas about value. She came home from California last September with $2 million in stock options from some tech company I'd never heard of. She drove a Range Rover in British Racing Green that cost more than my entire apartment building. She wore designer clothes and talked about disruption and scalability, and made sure everyone knew she'd escaped the small-town trap that held the rest of us hostage. The dinner where it all crystallized is burned into my memory with the clarity of trauma. My mother's 73rd birthday at Maggiano's, the Italian place with white tablecloths and candles that cast everyone in warm, forgiving light. Except There was nothing forgiving about what happened. I'd arrived early, wearing my best dress from Macy's, the navy one with the modest neckline that I'd gotten with my employee discount. I'd brought a gift I'd saved for, a cashmere cardigan in my mother's favorite shade of cream. When my sister walked in 40 minutes late, everyone turned to look. She had that effect. The expensive haircut, the jewelry that caught light like it had its own power source, the confidence of someone who'd never questioned whether they deserved to take up space. She kissed my mother on both cheeks like she'd learned in Europe, then glanced at the wrapped gift I'd placed at my mother's seat. "Oh, you went to Macy's," she said, loud enough for my aunt to hear. How convenient. The word dripped with condescension. My aunt laughed, uncomfortable but complicit. Dinner progressed with my sister dominating conversation, telling stories about venture capital meetings and tech conferences in Barcelona. Our cousin Marcus asked what I'd been up to, a kindness I appreciated, even as I dreaded answering. Before I could speak, my sister interjected. "Oh, she's still at Macy's," she said, taking a sip of the expensive wine she'd ordered for the table. 30 years in the same department. It's really quite remarkable, in its way. Most people would have found that soul-crushing, but I think some people just need routine, structure. They're not built for risk or ambition. The table went quiet. I felt my face burning, my hands gripping my napkin under the table hard enough to hurt. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. My youngest sister stared at her plate. "I don't think there's anything wrong with steady work," Marcus said carefully, trying to diffuse the moment. "Not everyone measures success by stock options." My sister laughed, that tinkling sound she'd perfected that somehow conveyed both amusement and dismissal. "Of course not. I'm not judging. I'm just saying we came from the same place, same parents, same opportunities. And look at where we ended up." She gestured at herself, then at me, the comparison hanging in the air like an accusation. It makes you wonder about ambition, doesn't it? About who has drive and who just doesn't. "That's enough," my youngest sister said quietly, but my sister wasn't finished. "She's the family failure," my sister announced, stating it like objective fact rather than cruelty. "I mean, we can all see it. She's never left Texas, never tried for anything bigger, never pushed herself. And now she's 55 years old, living in the same small-town bubble she grew up in, working retail like she's still 22 and figuring out her life." She turned to me then, her expression almost pitying. "I just don't understand how we came from the same gene pool when I'm out changing the world and you're still folding sweaters at Macy's." The words hit like physical blows. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't speak. My throat had closed around shame and rage in equal measure. I looked at my mother, desperately, needing her to say something, to defend me, to tell my sister she'd crossed a line. My mother looked down at her plate. Her fork moved a piece of chicken from one side to the other, and then she nodded. Just slightly, barely perceptible, but I saw it. That tiny movement of agreement that confirmed what I'd always suspected. I'd never been enough. Not smart enough, not ambitious enough, not successful enough to earn their respect. My aunt changed the subject quickly, asking about dessert. The dinner continued around me like I'd disappeared. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd been disappearing for years, and this was just the moment I finally noticed. I excused myself before cake, claiming a headache that was actually truth. My sister didn't try to stop me. My mother kissed my cheek absently, already focused on the tiramisu the waiter was bringing. I drove home crying so hard I had to pull over twice, sitting in empty parking lots trying to remember how to breathe. That was the night I realized the only thing I'd ever been was useful. And the moment I stopped being useful, I became a burden they needed to eliminate. I just didn't know yet that elimination was already in progress. Thursday mornings were the only time I felt like myself anymore. Sister Patricia picked me up at 9:30 sharp for our standing dominoes game at the church fellowship hall. I'd wear my cobalt blue church dress with matching hat, the one my grandmother bought me for Easter in 1995, the one I'd been saving for special occasions, but now wore every week, because if I was going to face the world, I needed armor. We'd set up at the long tables near the kitchen, 4 of us regulars plus whoever wandered in looking for company. And for 3 hours, I could pretend my life hadn't collapsed into this humiliating fragment of what it used to be. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee and pine sol, that particular combination that meant church community. The tables were old folding ones with metal legs that scraped against the linoleum when you moved them. Sister Patricia always brought homemade banana bread. Mrs. Henderson from the choir brought those butter cookies from the Danish bakery. We'd play for pennies, keeping score on a legal pad that dated back months, our handwriting documenting every game like evidence of our existence. I was good at dominoes. Better than good. I could track every tile played, calculate probabilities, read opponents' strategies 3 moves ahead. My mind worked sharp and clear at that table in ways my sister kept telling people it didn't. Every Thursday was proof I wasn't declining, wasn't confused, wasn't losing my grip on reality. But nobody seemed to notice that proof except the women playing with me. That particular Thursday, I arrived to find my sister already there talking to Pastor Williams near the coffee station. My stomach dropped. She never came on Thursdays. She barely came to church at all except for major holidays when appearances mattered. Seeing her there, in the fellowship hall, in my space, felt like invasion. She saw me come in, and her expression shifted into something that looked like concern, but felt like performance. The transformation was instant and calculated. Eyebrows drawing together, head tilting slightly, lips pursing into that expression people make when they're worried about someone fragile. She walked over, her heels clicking on the linoleum, and touched my arm gently, her fingers cold, even through my dress sleeve. "Mama told me you've been having some trouble remembering things," she said, her voice pitched for maximum audience. Pastor Williams was close enough to hear. So was Mrs. Henderson. So were the 3 other church ladies arranging cookies on a paper plate. "Are you sure you're okay to be out by yourself?" The words landed like accusations disguised as care. I wasn't by myself. Sister Patricia was standing right next to me, car keys still in her hand from driving me here like she did every single Thursday. But my sister acted like she was invisible, like I'd somehow teleported to the church through sheer confused wandering, found myself here without understanding how I'd arrived. "She's not by herself," Sister Patricia said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I picked her up, like I do every Thursday, like I've been doing for 5 years. My sister barely glanced at her. "Oh, I know you're very sweet to help out, but Mama's worried she's becoming dependent on people because she can't manage her own transportation anymore. It's one of the signs we've been noticing, the confusion about how she gets places." I felt my face burn with shame I didn't deserve to feel. "I'm not confused," I said, hating how defensive I sounded. "Patricia drives me because my car got sold when you moved me to the facility. You know that." "Sweetheart," my sister said, that same pitying tone from the birthday dinner. "We talked about this. You agreed to sell the car because you weren't safe driving anymore. Remember? You were having those episodes where you'd forget where you were going." "That never happened," I said, louder now, aware that we had an audience. "I never forgot where I was going. I've never had episodes. You're lying." My sister's expression shifted to patient sadness, like she was dealing with a confused child. She turned to Pastor Williams. "This is what we've been dealing with. She doesn't remember agreeing to things, doesn't remember conversations we've had. It's been so hard on Mama, watching this decline." Pastor Williams looked at me with something between concern and uncertainty. I could see him trying to decide which version to believe. My sister's carefully constructed narrative of my incompetence or my increasingly desperate denials that sounded exactly like someone who was confused and didn't realize it. Sister Patricia stepped between us, physically blocking my sister's access to me. "She plays dominoes with us every Thursday," she said firmly. "She remembers every game we've played this year. She knows everyone's birthday, everyone's grandchildren's names, what casseroles we brought to the potluck 6 months ago. She's sharper than half the people in this church. So whatever story you're selling, Pastor, I suggest you question it." My sister smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I appreciate you looking out for her. Really, I do. But family understands the full picture in ways friends can't." She squeezed my arm again, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt controlling. "I'll let you play your game. Just wanted to check on you. Mama worries, you know." She walked away, heels clicking, leaving behind the damage she'd intended. I could feel the shift in the room, the way people were looking at me now with that careful concern reserved for the fragile and failing. "Mrs. Henderson brought over the cookies with extra gentleness, like I might break. Pastor Williams touched my shoulder and asked if I needed anything, his tone suggesting he thought I might not remember why I was there. I sat at that domino table and played the best game of my life, winning every hand, proving nothing to people who'd already decided what to believe. If you're listening to this thinking, I should have said something right then. I hear you. I wanted to. But here's what manipulation does. It makes you doubt your own reality. My sister had been planting these seeds for months, little comments about my memory, my confusion, my inability to manage basic tasks. She told people I forgot to pay my electric bill. I hadn't. She said I left the stove on overnight. I didn't cook anymore because my apartment stove got disconnected when they moved me here. She claimed I called her at 2 a.m. asking where I was. I'd never called her at 2 a.m. in my life. But she said it enough times, in front of enough people, with enough manufactured concern in her voice, that people started believing it. And once they believed it, they started watching me differently, waiting for me to prove her right, looking for signs of the incompetence she'd invented. I could feel their pity and their judgment in equal measure, and it made me want to disappear. The worst part? My mother backed every word of it. She'd call me at the facility and ask if I'd taken my medication, even though I wasn't on any medication. She'd tell relatives I was having a hard time with reality, and when I'd protest, she'd lower her voice and say, "Sweetheart, this is exactly what your sister was talking about. You don't even realize when you're confused." It was like drowning in slow motion. Every time I tried to surface, they pushed me back under and told me I was imagining the water. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. I went to Domino's on Thursday mornings, and I came back to my studio, and I sat in the silence with Mahalia Jackson singing about rivers to cross, and I wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing my grip. Maybe this was what mental decline felt like, and I was the last to know. But late at night, when the gospel music played low and I couldn't sleep, I'd replay the memories, and they were sharp, crystal clear. I knew what I'd said, what I'd done, where I'd been. The confusion wasn't mine. It was theirs. They wanted me confused. They needed me confused. I just didn't know why yet. That answer came on a Tuesday afternoon in January, 3 weeks after my sister's performance at the church. Someone knocked on my door, a sound rare enough that I startled. Knocking was uncommon here. Most residents couldn't hear well enough to register it, and the staff had keys for emergencies. I was in my worn pajamas, the fleece ones with coffee stains I'd stopped caring about, my hair uncombed, existing in the kind of depression that made basic grooming feel like climbing mountains. The social worker standing in the hallway was young, maybe 30, with a folder thick enough to be a novel, and an expression that landed somewhere between professional and genuinely concerned. She wore a burgundy blazer and practical shoes, the uniform of someone who spent their days navigating difficult situations. "Ms. Carter, I'm Amanda Reeves from Adult Protective Services. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" My first thought was that my sister had escalated, that this was another move in whatever game she was playing. Adult Protective Services sounded official and threatening in equal measure. I'd never heard of them, and I definitely hadn't called them. But the winter cold was seeping through the open door, and Amanda looked serious enough that I let her in. Suddenly conscious of the unmade bed visible behind me, the dishes in the sink, the general disarray of depression. "I apologize for the mess," I heard myself say, that automatic Southern hospitality kicking in even in crisis. I wasn't expecting company. "You don't need to apologize," Amanda said, and something in her tone made me think she'd seen much worse. She sat at my tiny kitchenette table, the one that barely fit 2 chairs, and I noticed her taking in the space. The cramped studio, the institutional furniture, the single window with its view of the parking lot. She opened that folder with the careful deliberation of someone about to detonate a bomb. "Miss Carter, I need to show you some documents," she said, pulling out reading glasses from her blazer pocket. "And I need you to tell me if any of this is true. Take your time looking at them. This isn't a test, and you're not in trouble. I'm here to help you, but I need your honest answers about what you're seeing." She spread the first document across the table between us. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. What she showed me made my vision tunnel. Medical reports I'd never seen, signed by doctors I'd never visited, documenting cognitive decline I'd never experienced. Financial statements showing accounts in my name that I didn't recognize, with withdrawals I'd never authorized. Legal paperwork filed with the county court 3 months ago, declaring me mentally incompetent and assigning conservatorship to my sister. My signature at the bottom of every page, except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the loop on my C was wrong, and I always dotted my I with a circle because my grandmother taught me to when I was 7, and that's how she did it. "Did you sign these?" Amanda asked, watching my face carefully. "No." My voice came out thin and distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I've never seen any of this before." She nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. Your sister filed for emergency conservatorship, claiming you were a danger to yourself. She provided medical documentation that you have advancing dementia and that you've been experiencing financial confusion, leaving you vulnerable to exploitation." Amanda's expression hardened. "But the doctors listed on these reports? 2 of them don't exist. The 3rd one is retired and living in Florida. None of them have ever treated you." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table and tried to breathe, but my lungs wouldn't expand properly. Everything I'd experienced for the past 6 months, every humiliation, every moment of doubt, every time I questioned my own sanity, all of it crystallized into one brutal truth. My sister had been systematically destroying my reputation and my credibility so she could take legal control of my life. "Why?" I heard myself ask. "Why would she do this?" Amanda flipped to another section of the folder. "Because of this. A trust fund established by your grandmother in 1998, set to release to you in full when you turn 60. Current value, $890 The number hung in the air like accusation. I'd known about the trust vaguely, the way you know about distant relatives or old promises. But my grandmother died when I was 28, and I'd assumed whatever money she left had long since been distributed. I never asked about it because asking about inheritance felt greedy, and I'd been raised to believe that wanting things for yourself made you selfish. But my sister found out. Somehow she discovered that trust existed, and instead of telling me, instead of celebrating that our grandmother had left me something to secure my future, she decided I didn't deserve it, that she'd earned it through her success, through her escape from Texas, through her $2 million stock options that apparently weren't enough. She wanted mine too. And the only way to access it was to have me declared incompetent so she could control my assets as my conservator. She forged medical records. She lied to doctors. She created an entire false narrative of my mental decline and convinced our mother to help her sell it to everyone we knew. She moved me into this facility against my will, isolated me from my apartment and my independence, and emptied my home of everything I owned. All so she could steal money our grandmother left specifically to me. I stood up from that kitchen table, walked to my nightstand, picked up my worn leather Bible with handwritten notes in the margins, the one my grandmother gave me at my baptism, the one that still smelled like her perfume if you held it close enough. and I threw it against the wall with every ounce of rage I'd been swallowing for 6 months. The spine cracked. Pages scattered across the thin carpet. The sound was violent and final, and not nearly loud enough for what I was feeling. I collapsed next to those scattered pages, and I sobbed. Not quiet, dignified crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper than grief. That animal sound of betrayal that lives in your chest until something breaks it open. Gospel music still played low from the radio. Mahalia Jackson, oblivious to my destruction, singing about how we'll understand it better by and by. I didn't want to understand it better by and by. I wanted to understand it now. I wanted to know how my own blood could look at me and see nothing but an obstacle to wealth. How my mother could choose money over truth. How I'd spent my entire life sacrificing for a family that viewed me as collateral damage in their pursuit of more. The truth felt like falling, and I couldn't find the bottom. Sister Patricia found me there an hour later, still on the floor, surrounded by torn pages and my grandmother's handwriting. Amanda had called her, said I needed someone, and Patricia came immediately with 3 other women from our Thursday Dominoes group. They sat on my floor with me, and they didn't try to fix it or minimize it or tell me it would be okay. They just sat there while I cried and told me they believed me. I knew something was wrong, Patricia said. I've been playing dominoes with you every Thursday for 5 years. You remember every game we've ever played. You know everyone's birthdays and grandchildren's names and what casserole I brought to the church potluck in 2019. You're not confused. You never were. The validation felt like oxygen after drowning. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. I was being gaslit by experts. Sister Patricia knew a lawyer, Margaret Simmons, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases and had a reputation for being ruthless in the best possible way. Patricia made the call right there from my kitchenette, while I sat in my cobalt blue church dress with matching hat, still shaking, still trying to process that my family had waged war against me, and I'd been too loyal to recognize it as combat. Margaret came to the facility that evening. She was 63, sharp as broken glass, and angrier about my situation than I had the energy to be yet. She sat at that same tiny table where Amanda had shown me the truth, and she laid out a strategy that felt like warfare. "Here's what we're going to do," Margaret said. "You're going to play along. You're going to act confused when your sister visits. You're going to let her think she's won. Meanwhile, we're going to build a case that destroys every lie she's told. We have the medical records she forged. We have testimony from doctors who never treated you. We have bank statements showing where she's already started accessing your funds. And we're going to catch her in the act." The plan was simple and brutal. We'd tell my sister I wanted to access the trust early, that I needed help understanding the paperwork. We'd schedule a meeting at the bank where the trust was held. I'd bring my sister as my conservator, and the bank manager, who Margaret had already contacted, would be ready with every document needed to prove fraud. So that's what we did. I called my sister from the facility phone, my voice shaking just enough to sound authentic, and said I was confused about some financial documents, that I needed her help, that I was scared about money. She agreed immediately, that too sweet tone of fake concern oozing through the phone, and said she'd pick me up Friday morning. The 3 days between that call and Friday felt endless. Time stretched and contracted in strange ways, hours dragging during the day when I was alone with my thoughts. Then night arriving suddenly with the panic of what I was about to do. I barely slept. My mind kept running through scenarios. What if I froze? What if my sister convinced the bank manager I really was incompetent? What if this backfired and gave her more ammunition to use against me? I went to church on Sunday like always, sat in my usual pew 5 rows from the front on the right side, the spot I'd claimed for 2 decades. The wood was worn smooth under my hands from years of gripping it during prayers. I sang the hymns I'd known since childhood, Amazing Grace and How Great Thou Art. my voice joining 200 others in that particular harmony that only happens in Southern churches where everyone knows every word. My sister wasn't there, which wasn't unusual. She showed up maybe twice a year, Christmas and Easter, just enough to maintain the appearance of faith without the inconvenience of actual belief. My mother sat 3 rows behind me, deliberately avoiding eye contact. I could feel her presence like pressure on my back, that awareness you have of someone watching you even when you can't see them. During the passing of peace, when everyone shook hands and hugged, she stayed in her pew, suddenly very interested in her bulletin. The Cold War of our family dynamics was reaching its endgame, but she didn't know that yet. Nobody knew except Margaret, Amanda, Sister Patricia, and me. I carried that secret like a weapon I was finally ready to use. Pastor Williams preached about forgiveness that morning, about turning the other cheek, about family being sacred. I wondered if he'd feel differently if he knew what my family had done. If he'd still preach forgiveness, if he understood that some betrayals were unforgivable, not because of pride, but because forgiving them would mean accepting that you deserved the abuse. After service, Mrs. Henderson asked if I was feeling better. I realized my sister must have spread more rumors about my health, my confusion, my decline. Even my church family had started treating me differently, speaking slower, explaining things I already understood, watching me with that careful concern that made me feel like an exhibit in a tragedy. "I'm fine," I told her, and saw the doubt in her eyes. She didn't believe me. My sister had done her work too well. Thursday morning, Sister Patricia picked me up for Domino's. The morning was brutally cold, frost still clinging to windshields at 10 a.m., the kind of weather that made Texas feel foreign to itself. I was already dressed in my cobalt blue church dress with matching hat, even though Domino's didn't require formal clothing. Patricia saw me and understood immediately. "Tomorrow?" she asked, and I nodded. The other women knew what was happening. They'd become my allies in this fight, my witnesses, the people who'd testify if needed that I was sharp and present and completely coherent. When I walked into the fellowship hall, they stood up one by one and hugged me, not the careful, fragile hugs I'd been getting from everyone else, but fierce, tight embraces that said, "We believe you and we're with you." We didn't talk about my sister or the plan. We just played dominoes and drank sweet tea from the church kitchen, and I absorbed their silent solidarity like medicine. But this time, when I won 3 games in a row, they made sure Pastor Williams was watching from his office door. Made sure he saw me calculating odds, tracking tiles, playing with the sharp strategic mind my sister claimed I'd lost. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. Every conversation, every game, every moment of clarity was ammunition I'd need when this war finally went public. Friday morning came bright and freezing. Winter had settled into Houston with unusual determination, the kind of cold that made everyone complain and wear inappropriate coats because Texans never quite commit to actual winter clothing. I woke at 5 a.m., couldn't sleep anymore. Spent 2 hours staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to recognize myself. This was it. The day I'd either reclaim my life or lose it completely. There was no middle ground now. I showered carefully, washed my hair, put on makeup for the first time in weeks. Small acts of self-care that felt like armor. I was wearing my cobalt blue church dress with matching hat, but I'd ironed it the night before, made sure there were no wrinkles, no signs of the depression I'd been drowning in. If this was going to be a performance, I needed to look the part. Confused, but dignified. Vulnerable, but still trying. Competent enough to be sympathetic, impaired enough that my sister wouldn't suspect I was setting a trap. By 8:30, I was waiting in the lobby of the facility, watching through the glass doors for that Range Rover. My hands were shaking. I shoved them in my coat pockets and tried to breathe like Margaret had taught me. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 4. Combat breathing, she called it. Techniques soldiers used before battle. This was battle. I was going to war with my own blood. My sister pulled up at 8:45, exactly 15 minutes late, because she was always exactly that late to everything, just enough to make you wait without being egregiously rude. The Range Rover in British Racing Green gleamed even in the gray morning light, a vehicle that cost more than most people made in 2 years. She didn't get out, just honked once, expecting me to come to her. I walked out into the freezing morning, my breath fogging, and climbed into the passenger seat. The interior smelled like her expensive perfume and leather cleaner. Classical music played softly from speakers that probably cost more than my entire sound system back at my old apartment. "Good morning," she said, barely glancing at me as she pulled out of the parking lot. "How are you feeling today?" The question was automatic, performative. She didn't actually care, but I answered the way she expected. "A little confused," I said, making my voice small and uncertain. "Thank you for helping me with this. I don't really understand all the financial paperwork." She glanced at my outfit, and I saw the calculation in her eyes, the satisfaction. "Good," her expression said. "She's dressed up because she doesn't understand what's happening. She thinks this is a special occasion." "Of course," she said, her tone dripping with false warmth. "That's what family is for. You don't need to worry about anything. I'll handle everything." The drive to the bank took 20 minutes. She made small talk about California, about her company's latest funding round that brought in $12 million, about how she was thinking of buying a vacation home in Napa Valley near some vineyard I'd never heard of. She talked about her Tesla stock, her Bitcoin investments, her real estate portfolio, all of it designed to highlight the distance between her success and my failure, to remind me that she'd earned the right to control my life because she'd made something of herself, and I hadn't. I played my role perfectly, asking simple questions that made me sound interested but ignorant. What's a funding round? Is Bitcoin the same as regular money? How many bedrooms would the Napa house have? Each question reinforcing her belief that I was too simple to understand complex finances, too confused to manage my own affairs, too incompetent to notice I was being robbed. "You know," she said as we merged onto the highway, "I've been thinking about your future. The trust is substantial, but if we're not careful, it could be gone in a few years. You don't understand how to manage money like this. You've never had to." She glanced at me, her expression concerned in that manufactured way. "I think the best thing would be for me to maintain control of the funds even after we access them. Set up a monthly allowance for you, handle the investments, make sure you're taken care of." "That sounds good," I said, keeping my voice grateful and relieved. "I don't want to mess anything up." "You won't," she said, reaching over to pat my hand in a gesture that was supposed to be comforting, but felt possessive. "I'll make sure everything is handled properly. That's what Grandma would have wanted. She left you that money because she knew you'd need someone to help you manage it." The lie was so smooth, so confident. Grandma left me that money because she knew my sister would try to take everything else. She protected me from beyond the grave because she understood family dynamics better than I ever did. But my sister had rewritten that narrative to serve herself, convinced herself she was the hero of this story instead of the villain. We pulled into the bank parking lot at 9:15. My sister checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, reapplied lipstick, adjusted her designer blazer. She was dressing for an audience too, I realized. The successful sister, the responsible caretaker, the family member who'd stepped up to help her incompetent sibling. She'd played this role so many times she believed it herself. I followed her into the bank, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The bank was downtown, one of those old buildings with marble floors and high ceilings that made every sound echo with institutional importance. Columns reached up 30 feet, remnants of an era when banks were built like temples to communicate permanence and trustworthiness. The security guard at the door nodded at us. The teller behind bulletproof glass smiled professionally. Everything about this place screamed legitimacy, which made what my sister had done feel even more audacious. The manager, Robert Chen, met us at the door with a smile that looked friendly, but was actually tactical. Margaret had briefed him thoroughly over 2 phone calls and 1 in-person meeting where she'd laid out exactly what was about to happen. He knew exactly what we were doing. He was in his early 40s, wearing a suit that managed to be both professional and slightly rumpled, the look of someone who worked long hours and cared more about competence than appearance. "Ms. Carter," he said, shaking my hand firmly, holding eye contact long enough to communicate we're on the same team. "And you must be her sister. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate you both taking the time this morning." My sister turned on her charm immediately, the smile that had closed million-dollar deals. Of course, anything to help her understand her financial situation. It's been so confusing for her. "I'm sure," Robert said, his tone neutral. "Let's go to my office where we can discuss the trust in private. Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be lovely," my sister said. I shook my head, not trusting myself to swallow anything without choking. His office had glass walls overlooking the main floor, which seemed like poor planning until I realized Margaret had chosen this bank specifically because everything that happened here would be visible and documented. Security cameras covered every angle. The glass walls meant anyone on the main floor could see us, could witness whatever was about to unfold. There would be no dispute about what happened, no he said she said ambiguity. The office was modest. A desk with a computer, 2 chairs for visitors, filing cabinets along one wall, a small table with a water pitcher and glasses. Certificates and banking licenses hung in simple frames. A photo of Robert with his family at what looked like a beach vacation, everyone smiling in that forced way of professional portraits. We sat. My sister took the chair closest to the desk, positioning herself as the primary decision-maker. I sat slightly behind her, playing the confused dependent, the person who needed translation and protection from complex adult transactions. Robert pulled a file from his desk drawer, thick and labeled with my name. Inside would be everything Margaret had prepared, the real medical records, the proof of fraud, the documentation that would dismantle every lie my sister had constructed. But he didn't open it yet. First, he needed my sister to incriminate herself. Robert spread documents across his desk, the trust paperwork my grandmother had established 28 years ago. My sister leaned forward, already reaching for the pen, ready to sign on my behalf. "Before we proceed," Robert said carefully, "I need to verify the conservatorship documentation. Ms. Carter, can you confirm that you authorized your sister to manage your financial affairs?" This was my moment, the trap springing shut. I looked Robert directly in the eyes and said, clear as Sunday morning church bells, "I never authorized anything. I don't have dementia. I've never been diagnosed with cognitive decline. And I never signed conservatorship papers giving my sister access to my accounts." My sister's face did something complicated. Shock, then rage, then a desperate scramble back to manipulation. "Sweetheart, you're confused again. Remember? We talked about this. You signed the papers at Mom's house. You were having one of your good days." "No," I said. "I wasn't. Because those papers are forgeries. The medical records are fake. The doctors listed don't exist or never treated me. And you knew all of it because you created all of it." Robert pulled out another folder, this one prepared by Margaret. Inside were the real medical records from my actual doctor, showing 0 cognitive issues. Statements from the non-existent doctors confirming they'd never seen me. Bank records showing my sister had already withdrawn $43,000 from accounts she'd opened in my name using the fraudulent conservatorship. My sister stood up fast enough to knock her chair backward. "This is ridiculous. She's clearly not competent to make these decisions. Look at her. She's wearing a church dress to a bank meeting." "I'm wearing a dress my grandmother bought me," I said quietly, because I knew I'd need to feel her with me today when I confronted the granddaughter who's trying to steal the money she left me. Security was already moving toward the office. Robert had contacted them before we arrived, just in case things escalated. My sister saw them coming, and her expression shifted one more time, from anger to something uglier: entitlement. "You don't deserve that money," she hissed. "You've done nothing with your life. Nothing. I've built an empire, and you've folded clothes for 30 years. Grandma would have wanted me to have it. I've actually made something of myself." "And yet," I said, standing up so we were eye level, "you still needed to steal from me to feel rich enough." That's when she tried to leave, but the doors were already blocked by security, and Margaret was walking through them with a police officer and enough documentation to file criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. Watching my sister realize she'd been caught felt like nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, not even relief, just empty. Because the woman being escorted out of that bank in handcuffs was still my sister. The woman who'd shared my childhood bedroom and my mother's attention and our grandmother's love. And she'd looked at me and seen nothing but something to be eliminated. The justice was external, but it didn't come from the police, it came from community, because what I did next changed everything. Sunday morning service at First Methodist Church is always packed. Winter hadn't stopped anyone. They came in their coats and scarves, filled the pews, sang the opening hymns with that particular Texas enthusiasm that makes Baptist churches feel like stadium concerts. The sanctuary could hold 300, but felt intimate somehow. The stained glass windows casting colored light across faces I'd known for decades, the organ music vibrating through wooden pews worn smooth by generations of congregants. I arrived early, 30 minutes before the service started, and I walked that sanctuary like I was preparing for battle. Because I was. I sat in my usual spot, 5 rows from the front on the right side, wearing my cobalt blue church dress with matching hat. But this time, the outfit felt like truth instead of armor. Sister Patricia sat on my left. 3 other women from our Dominoes group sat directly behind me. Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Washington, and Clara Sims, who'd been playing with us for 2 years. They were my witnesses, my battalion. We didn't speak much before the service. They just sat near me in solidarity, their presence communicating everything that needed saying. Whatever was about to happen, I wasn't alone. The church filled slowly, families with small children rushing in late, elderly couples walking carefully down the aisle, the choir assembling in their robes, shuffling music, warming up their voices. Pastor Williams greeted people at the door, shaking hands, that particular blend of spiritual authority and genuine warmth he'd perfected over 30 years of ministry. And then my sister walked in, late, as always, at 10:58, when the service was scheduled to start at 11. She scanned for a seat near the front where important people sat, where she could be seen by the maximum number of congregants. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost $3,000, her hair professionally styled, her makeup camera-ready. She looked successful, polished, trustworthy. She saw me, and her expression flickered, just for a second, like she wasn't sure if she should acknowledge me or pretend I didn't exist. I watched her calculate. Had I told anyone about the bank? Did anyone know what happened Friday? Was her reputation still intact? She chose existence, walking over with that fake, concerned smile, ready to perform sisterly devotion for the congregation. She was still playing the role of the good daughter, the caring sister, the family member who'd stepped up to help her incompetent sibling. "Good morning," she said, loud enough to be heard 3 rows back. Her voice carried that same performative warmth from every public interaction we'd had for months. "How are you feeling today?" The question was a trap. If I said I was fine, she could express concern that I didn't recognize my own limitations. If I said I was struggling, she could nod sympathetically and use it as evidence of my decline. Every interaction with her had become warfare, disguised as care. I smiled, didn't answer, let the silence stretch uncomfortable while people around us shifted in their seats. "Are you feeling okay?" she pressed, her concern ratcheting up for the audience. "You seem a little out of it." Sister Patricia leaned forward. "She's feeling perfectly fine. Why don't you go find your seat? Service is about to start." My sister's smile tightened, but she maintained composure. "Of course, I just worry about her. I'm sure you understand." She walked toward the front, found a seat in the third row next to the Hendersons' adult son, who was visiting from Dallas. I watched her settle in, crossing her legs elegantly, opening her bulletin. Performing the role of devout churchgoer she'd rehearsed twice a year. The organ began. Everyone stood for the opening hymn. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the hymnal, but I sang every word of "A Mighty Fortress is Our God" with as much strength as I could summon. The words felt prophetic. And though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear. I was done fearing, done letting her devils undo me. Pastor Williams started announcements, then opened the floor for testimony time, that 10-minute window where anyone could stand and share their faith journey or ask for prayer. I stood up. My sister's face went carefully neutral. "I need to share something with you all," I said, my voice carrying across the sanctuary. "About family and truth and what happens when people use your faith community to destroy your reputation." The room went silent. Pastor Williams nodded for me to continue, unaware of what was coming but trusting the process. My sister's neutral expression started cracking. "6 months ago, my sister told many of you that I was losing my mind, that I was confused, forgetful, unable to manage my own life. She said I needed to be moved into a care facility for my own safety. She convinced our mother to back her story. And she did all of this while filing forged medical records and fraudulent conservatorship papers, so she could steal $890 that our grandmother left me in a trust fund." The silence deepened. I saw faces I'd known for 20 years registering shock, anger, understanding. My sister tried to stand up, but Sister Patricia blocked her path to the aisle. "She created fake medical records," I continued. "She forged my signature on legal documents. She had me declared mentally incompetent by doctors who don't exist. She isolated me from my home, my possessions, and my independence. And she did it all because she believed she deserved my inheritance more than I did because she's successful, and I'm just a retail worker who never left Texas." I pulled out the folder Margaret had prepared, the one with copies of everything, the forged medical records, the fraudulent conservatorship papers, the bank statements showing theft. I held it up so everyone could see it was real. That this wasn't a breakdown or a delusion or another sign of the incompetence my sister had invented. "She called me the family failure," I said, and our mother agreed with her. They both decided I wasn't worth protecting because I hadn't made enough money or achieved enough status to matter. But what I learned is that family doesn't require you to prove your worth through sacrifice. Real family doesn't steal from you and call it love. My sister tried to speak, but her voice came out strangled. She looked around at 200 faces staring at her with dawning recognition and judgment, and she realized she'd been caught in front of everyone who mattered. The community she'd manipulated, the congregation she'd used as cover, they all knew now. Every lie she'd told was exposed. Pastor Williams stood up slowly, his expression transforming from confusion to something harder. "I think we need to talk privately," he said to my sister. "Right now." She tried to leave through the side door, but Sister Patricia and 3 deacons blocked it, not aggressively, just firmly, the kind of community accountability that doesn't require violence, just presence. She'd have to walk past all of them, past every witness to her manipulation, past me standing in my cobalt blue dress that suddenly felt less like armor and more like confidence. "I want you to know," I said directly to her now, "that I've already filed criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. The district attorney has everything, but what you'll really lose is this, these people, this community, the respect you spent years performing to earn. That's gone now, and you did it to yourself." She left through the main aisle, pushing past people who stepped back like she was contagious. My mother followed her, not meeting anyone's eyes, loyal to the end, to the daughter who brought status instead of the daughter who brought truth. I watched them go and felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, not even relief. Just a door closing on a chapter of my life that had needed to end years ago. The congregation erupted in whispers that turned into conversations, that turned into Sister Patricia hugging me so hard my hat fell off. People I'd known for decades came forward to apologize for believing my sister's lies, for not questioning harder, for letting me be isolated without fighting for me. And I accepted their apologies because that's what community does. It makes mistakes and it repairs them. Within a week, everyone in our small town Main Street, with local shops and a diner, knew what happened. My sister's Range Rover in British Racing Green stopped appearing at the local grocery store or the boutique downtown. She'd rented a house here to stay close to my mother, to maintain her image as the successful daughter who came home to help family. But after that Sunday, neighbors stopped waving. The diner hostess wouldn't seat her. The pharmacy clerk looked through her when she tried to pick up a prescription. The community she'd weaponized against me turned their backs on her. That's external justice when it comes from community. Not legal consequences, though those came too. Margaret filed a civil suit that froze my sister's access to any of my accounts and demanded return of everything she'd stolen. But the real justice was watching her reputation dissolve in the place where she'd worked hardest to build it. My mother called me once, 2 weeks after that Sunday. She asked if I'd consider dropping the charges, if we could handle this privately, if I understood how this was affecting the family reputation. I told her the truth had already affected the family reputation, and I was done protecting people who'd never protected me. She hung up without saying goodbye. I moved out of the senior living facility within 2 weeks. The trust was mine, legally protected now by court order and Margaret's ruthless documentation. I didn't buy anything extravagant. The Range Rover in British Racing Green I'd sometimes imagined owning felt tainted now, associated with my sister's performance of success. Instead, I found peace in small things that felt like freedom. Opening a new bank account in only her name felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Just seeing my name alone on the checks, no conservator, no co-signer, no emergency contact who could access my funds without permission. That simple act of financial independence meant more than any luxury purchase ever could. I rented a small house near my youngest sister, the one who'd been overlooked like me, the middle child who never quite fit either the success narrative or the failure label. We'd barely spoken in years because family dynamics had pushed us to opposite corners, but after that Sunday, she reached out. She'd known something was wrong. She'd tried to visit me at the facility and been told I wasn't accepting visitors. My older sister had isolated me from everyone, even the family members who might have questioned her story. Now my youngest sister and I talk every day. She comes over and we play dominoes on my back porch, just the two of us, or sometimes with Sister Patricia and the churchwomen who became my real family when blood family failed. We drink sweet tea from a glass pitcher I keep in my refrigerator, and we listen to gospel music playing low from my new radio, and we don't apologize for taking up space. The house has 3 bedrooms, which feels like luxury after that studio apartment with a kitchenette. I furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing things that felt like mine instead of filling space quickly. My worn leather Bible with handwritten notes in the margins sits on my nightstand, spine still cracked from when I threw it against the wall. I had it repaired by a bookbinder downtown, but I asked him to leave the crack visible. I needed the reminder that breaking isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the beginning of rebuilding. Winter has given way to spring now. The season changed while I was changing with it, and I noticed when the cold finally lifted and I could open my windows without fog collecting on the glass. My cobalt blue church dress with matching hat hangs in my closet, still special, but no longer armor. I don't need armor anymore. I need comfortable shoes and a bank account that's mine and the knowledge that I survived my own family's betrayal without becoming like them. What I need others to know, what keeps me awake some nights with the urgency of it, is how to protect yourself from this exact situation. Because elder financial abuse isn't rare, it's epidemic, and it usually comes from family members who use love and loyalty as weapons against you. Watch for relatives who suddenly take intense interest in your finances. If someone starts asking detailed questions about your accounts, your assets, your future plans for money, ask yourself why they need to know. Real concern for your well-being doesn't require access to your bank statements. Never sign financial or medical documents without your own lawyer present. Not your family's lawyer, not a lawyer your sister recommends. Not someone your mother says you can trust. Your own attorney who represents only you and who reviews everything before you sign it. Pay for that protection. It's worth exponentially more than the cost. Know the statistics because they'll make you vigilant instead of trusting. A 2012 study revealed that 1 in 4 nursing home residents suffered physical abuse. And that doesn't even count financial or emotional abuse. Research proves that half of all people with dementia experience abuse, usually from family members who see vulnerability as opportunity. But here's what they don't tell you. Abusers create the appearance of incompetence before you actually experience any cognitive decline. They isolate you first, then claim the isolation proves you can't function independently. My sister convinced people I was losing my mind months before filing any legal paperwork. She planted seeds of doubt about my competence so that when she finally moved to take control, everyone already believed her narrative. That's how financial predators work. They destroy your credibility before they destroy your bank account. Because by the time you realize what's happening, no one believes your version of events. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong with how family is treating you, if their concern feels performative or controlling, if they're making decisions for your own good without your input, you're not paranoid. You're recognizing manipulation before it fully traps you. Protect your assets legally. Set up trusts that can't be accessed by conservators. Name beneficiaries who aren't related to each other so one person can't manipulate the whole family. Keep your financial information private, even from people you love, because love doesn't always prevent greed. And understand this, because it's the hardest lesson I learned. Sacrifice doesn't guarantee love. I spent 55 years believing that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, proved my loyalty enough, my family would eventually see my value and give back. But real family doesn't require you to surrender everything to prove your worth. Real family doesn't view your inheritance as their opportunity. Real family protects you instead of predating on you. My grandmother's trust wasn't just money. It was her way of telling me I deserved protection, especially from the people who were supposed to love me most. She knew something I didn't, back when she set up that trust to release when I turned 60. She knew I'd need resources when I was most vulnerable. She knew family dynamics could turn predatory. She protected me from beyond the grave because she understood that sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who will bleed you dry. I'm 56 now. 1 year older than I was that night, lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at a ceiling fan in a facility I never chose, wondering how my life had collapsed into something I didn't recognize. That woman feels like a different person now, someone I sympathize with, but can't quite inhabit anymore. She was so loyal, so determined to believe family meant safety, so convinced that sacrifice would eventually be rewarded. This version of me knows better. I know that protection matters more than performance. That solitude is better than toxic connection. That walking away from blood relations isn't failure, it's survival. My sister is facing criminal charges that will likely result in probation and restitution, but not jail time. She'll pay back what she stole, but she won't do serious prison time because white-collar crime rarely does. The real punishment is that she lost access to the community she valued, lost the respect she performed for, lost the image she'd spent millions building. My mother still calls occasionally, always when my sister isn't around, always with some version of, "Can't we just move past this?" I've stopped answering. Moving past requires acknowledgement, apology, changed behavior. She's offered none of those things. She's just uncomfortable with the consequences of her choices and wants me to absolve her so she can feel better. I'm not interested in making her comfortable anymore. Instead, I'm interested in my back porch and my youngest sister's laugh and the dominoes games we play until the sun sets. I'm interested in Sister Patricia's friendship and the churchwomen who showed up when my blood family disappeared. I'm interested in the way sweet tea tastes when you're drinking it in your own house, in your own chair, with your own money in your own bank account that nobody can access without your permission. I'm interested in the simplicity of a life that doesn't require constant sacrifice to prove I deserve to exist. I wake up when I want to. I eat what I want to. I wear comfortable clothes that don't make statements. I listen to gospel music as loud as I want because there's nobody here to tell me to turn it down. And when Mahalia Jackson sings about troubles of the world, I understand now that sometimes the deepest troubles come from the people closest to you, and the greatest victory is surviving them without becoming them. The house I'm renting is temporary. I'm looking for something permanent near my youngest sister's place, somewhere we can grow old together the way family is supposed to, supporting each other instead of exploiting each other. Close enough to visit daily, but far enough to have our own lives. I want a house with a big back porch and room for a garden and windows that catch morning light. I don't need the Range Rover in British Racing Green anymore. I drive a used Honda that's reliable and paid for and gets me where I need to go without making statements about status. The only statement I'm interested in making is that I survived, I rebuilt, and I'm not available for exploitation anymore. So if you're listening to this from wherever you are, if you're lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if you're imagining the manipulation, if you're questioning whether your family really has your best interests at heart, trust that instinct. You're not crazy. You're not confused. You're recognizing predation disguised as care, and that recognition is the first step toward protecting yourself. Where are you listening from? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have exposed your sister publicly or handled it privately? Would you have forgiven your mother or cut contact completely? I'm curious what you think because I'm still figuring out what healing looks like when the wounds came from the people who were supposed to keep you safe. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced something similar, or you know someone who has, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in this. Hit the like button if you believe family accountability matters more than family loyalty. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about women who survived their own families and rebuilt their lives on their own terms. Because that's what this is really about. Not revenge, not bitterness, not even justice, though that matters too. It's about knowing that you can survive betrayal from the people who were supposed to love you most, and you can build something better on the other side. You can find family in places that aren't blood. You can trust again, carefully, with better boundaries and clearer eyes. And you can take up space in your own life without apologizing for existing. I learned that at 55, lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at a ceiling fan, finally understanding that my grandmother's trust wasn't just money. It was her telling me I mattered enough to protect, that I deserved safety even when my own family didn't provide it, that surviving meant more than sacrificing, and that sometimes the family you choose is the only family worth keeping.